Daniel Dromm was instrumental in bringing justice for Julio Rivera, a young gay man, killed by 3 self-described white supremacist skinheads out hunting for a gay man to kill. Julio was murdered on July 2nd, 1990, on the corner of 37th Avenue and 78th Street in Jackson Heights. Daniel Dromm fought for the conviction of Julio's murderers after their original conviction was overturned due to a technicality. The annual Queens LGBTQIA Pride Parade was founded in response to Julio's murder and in response to the rejection of the Children of the Rainbow curriculum, to show the world that LGBTQ people are your family, your friends, your neighbors who live in Queens. Help me welcome former council member and chair of the City Council Finance Committee, Daniel Dromm. And also moderating the talkback tonight is our very own author of tonight's piece, Christopher Julian Jiménez, right here.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Here, you're going to come right up here.
In front?
Yeah, and I'll give you a mic. Here you go. We'll do a handheld. Awesome. Thank you, Joseph. There you go. Great. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to Julio and going down like that, and staying for the talk back. Danny Dromm you are an icon to me. I've looked up to you for so long, and I wanted to sort of start out with some statistics and some facts. It is 40 years ago since you came out at the school board meeting. It is 34 years since Julio was murdered. It's 31 years since Queen's Pride Parade, 15 years since your election, 8 years since Richard Spuntoff created the documentary Julio of Jackson Heights, which inspired this play, and 5 years since the very first reading of this play at the Kupferberg Holocaust Center. So Julio's legacy is alive and well. So what we're talking about today is education and activism. And what I've admired about you for so long is how you began as an educator. Can you talk about your journey from being an educator and how that transitioned into activism and politics?
Sure. So first, let me say thank you for doing this, for the play, for everything that you've done, for your activism through the play and through the work that you've done as well. It really is inspiring, and I have to say, it was just really, really wonderful tonight, and it really captures the essence and the spirit of what I know and think of when I think about Jackson Heights, when I think about what happened with Julio Rivera, and just the struggle of the people who were my former constituents who lived in that district. So thank you for the work that you've done
to make this
possible tonight. Thank you. And I also want to point out that we are joined by the president of Queensborough Community College. President Mangino is here. She sat through the whole show. And Vice President DeDeo is here as well. So thank you. And it really is so important. And this is not the first time that you've been to an LGBT type thing. You were at Queen's Pride, and you marched with us at Queen's Pride. And that's just so important because I think that sends a really strong message about what Queensborough is all about. And when Vice President DeDeo spoke on Wednesday, because I was here on Wednesday for the ribbon cutting for the theater, you mentioned the word community, which I know is really a big, important word to Susan as well. And I think that having things like this is a really good reflection of almost said LaGuardia, of Queensborough and the community that is here. And thank you for that as well. And of course to Susan Agan, who is my very good friend and who has brought so many wonderful shows and events here to this theater. And congratulations again on the renovations. So, and then your question again?
So how did you transition from education into activism into politics? What was the moment that you decided on?
So what wasn't really said is that I was a New York City public school teacher for 25 years before I got elected to the city council. And I was actually a director of a daycare center in Harlem for 6 years before that. So I spent 31 and a half years of my life in education. But back in 1992, there was an attempt by the New York City Department of Education to create a curriculum which would deal with all of New York's diverse communities because of the beating and killing of African American men, specifically in Howard Beach and in Bensonhurst. That was around the time that Al Sharpton got started, and we educators, not myself, but other educators, but I was partially involved in it, decided to write a curriculum which would address those issues of race and color and ethnicity, and we also said, hey, if we're gonna do that, we might as well also add elements of LGBTQ into the curriculum. And it was a voluntary curriculum for teachers that if they found that they had kids in their classroom who had same-sex parents, they would have some resources to be able to do it. Well, my school board came out vociferously and with such vitriol against this curriculum, more so because of the inclusion of LGBTQ issues than anything else in the curriculum, although I always called them equal opportunity haters because they were opposed to everything, to bilingual education, to multicultural education, and certainly to anything to mention with LGBT. And that's when I realized I was a gay teacher, and I was out to friends and to family, and I'd gone to all the bars on Roosevelt Avenue in Jackson Heights, and loved that life, you know. But I said, you know, I have a power here because I thought I was a good teacher, that I could speak to the education issues in a way that maybe others couldn't. And so I came out as a gay teacher very publicly. It was on the cover of Newsday. I hadn't told my mother that I was going to be on the cover of Newsday, and she went out to buy the newspaper, and there I was, you know, and she was like, oh my God, you know, now the relatives are going to know. And I'm like, Ma, the relatives have known for 20 years, you know. And anyway, but my mom was great. My mom was great because I told her in 1973 that I was gay, and she was very, very supportive. But I immediately made the connection when I came out as a gay teacher between politics and education, and how so much of what happens in education is determined by politics. And we were just recently reminded of that by, you know, what happened in Nassau County about 2 days ago with the Nassau County executive, Bruce Blakeman, who has come out and said that he is going to ban transgender women, only women, not transgender men, or any binary, I guess a non-binary here also is what he said, from any sports facility in Nassau County. And he's specifically targeting young trans girls. Elected official, coming out again, 30 years after the Queen's Pride Parade started, 30 years after I came out as a gay teacher, and the fight and the struggle continues. And in your dedication tonight, you mentioned Hex in Oklahoma, who was killed as well. And that, I think, it became about as a direct result of political policies that say it's okay to attack LGBTQIA folks. And so that's why I said we have to fight this, and the only way to change things was really to change the political power structure. And that's why after that, I got involved in politics, I became a district leader, and then eventually ran for city council.
Amazing.
But everybody can do it. Everybody can do it.
Everyone can do it. Well, that brings me to another point. Everyone can do it, but not everyone does it. What was the moment that you decided, I have to do this, that transitioned you from being a public school teacher, an educator, to say, I want to get on the other side of this because I think I can help on another way? What was the moment for you?
I had been peripherally involved in the LGBT rights movement. I wore my shirt from the early days, 1973.
Yes.
Since 1973, but was not really as deeply involved as I would become when I came out as a gay teacher. And what motivated me to come out as a gay teacher was I went down to pick up my students after lunch, and we were in the yard, and there was this one girl, and she was crying, and I said, "What's going on, honey? Why are you crying?" I can't tell. I said, "Let's go upstairs." I had my 34 kids with me. I brought them upstairs, put them in the room, and had her out in the hallway. And I said, why are you crying? What's going on? And finally, I got out of her. She said to me, "They're teasing me because my mother's a lesbian." And here I was, a gay teacher, not fully out in the professional sense. And I said I was just handed this. I knew my school board was, opposed to the curriculum, the rainbow curriculum, which was inclusive of LGBT people. And I said, I don't have any resources to help this child, And here she is telling me and asking, basically, for help. And so that's when I said, I've got to do something. And that's when I wound up going down to the LGBT Community Services Center, and I came out as a gay teacher, and it was all over the news for 4 days, et cetera, so forth and so on.
That's incredible.
Best thing I ever did, though.
Yes, absolutely. It's I've always been so inspired by you. I remember the Newsday article as a kid, and when I've always known I wanted to be
as
an
a kid.
That wasn't shade. It wasn't a read. But I remember that stuck with me, and I always knew I wanted to be an educator. And it was so important for me when I was an educator to be an out and proud educator, so that my students can see reflections of themselves in me, because I didn't have it. I talked about it a little bit at the last talkback yesterday. That growing up. My age, I'm 46, and I grew up without mentors that were obliterated by the AIDS crisis or put back into the closet or were shamed, and I didn't have a lot of role models, and you were one of them that I could see from a distance that I didn't know, that survived, thrived, and made change. So you have always been an inspiration to me to live authentically and truthfully in my own skin, no matter where. And you paved the way for me to be that here at Queensborough, and Queensborough has made it really welcoming for me to do that and sort of be a chair of a department and, be this.
I would never have guessed.
Yeah, right? So that's a thank you to you. Can you tell me a little bit more about the rainbow curriculum? Tell me about, so the backlash came from just differences, right? So teaching children about people who are different. What do you think the fear is? And how do we combat that as educators in our classrooms?
It is partially fear, but motivated by hate. The president of my school board at the time was a woman named Mary Cummins. And like I said, she was opposed to everything. She was opposed to bilingual education. There was another person on the school board named Frank Borzelli-Airy. And he had come into the classroom and pulled books off the shelf that dealt with multiculturalism. He hated a book called I Hate English, which was about an English language learner. We call them L's as public school teachers. And it's a young girl who comes to America and she says, I hate English, because she doesn't know English, but she knows how to say, I hate English. Well, by the end of the book, she loves English because then she learned English. But apparently my school board members did not read the book to the end of it, and didn't understand what it was about. But so it was that, and of course hatred is also like based on fear. Fear equals ignorance equals fear, etc., so forth and so on. But it's just hard to describe them. But I see so much of that same fear and ignorance, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier tonight with the president, and saying, people who have never had the experience to go outside of their own community and don't know other communities fear those communities. One of the things that I always tried to do when I was a public school teacher was to make sure the kids in my classroom were comfortable. So, teaching about LGBTQ kids, families, etc., but also Muslims and Hindu kids who had come to my class. they were new. When I first started out teaching in Sunnyside, it was a mixed community, mostly Latino and white, but then we had others beginning to come in. I knew nothing about what it meant to be a Muslim or anything like that. I had to go out and get educated on it. And when I was finally elected in the city council, I had one of my former students come to me and say to me, Mr. Dromm, I'd like to be an intern in your office. And I said, why did you ask to come to me to ask to be an intern in my office? He said, Mr. Dromm, you're the only teacher that ever said Muslim in the classroom. So that was in the 2000s. So we're not too far from that, And so, also being able to say the word LGBTQ is really important because people need to hear that. They need to know that there are safe people who we can talk to.
Absolutely. You were one of the co-founders and co-organizers of the Queen's Pride Parade in 1993. Can you talk about how that began, what sparked it, and what challenges did you face in Queens to start this parade, which still goes on today?
Sure. So we basically knew and heard about and became active around the murder of Julio Rivera. It had never been done, and there was never been a pride parade outside of any borough except for Manhattan. Today you have one in Brooklyn, and you have one in Staten Island, you have a pride celebration in the Bronx, but it had never been done before. So when we first proposed it, there were a lot of people, even within the LGBTQ community at the time, who were like, this is not going to happen. This is Queens, And we just had the murder of Julio Rivera. Nobody's going to show up in Jackson Heights in March. And in fact, that first parade, we had cops on the rooftop with rifles, in case anybody was like, going to, hurt us or bomb us or whatever. And we had helicopter escort, which I didn't really want, by the way, because I thought that might turn people off, but I didn't object to it too much because I felt like the safety of the people who attended the parade, was more important, because otherwise they would never come back again. And so I was trying to build a movement at that time. And so we came up with the idea, and then I'm, by the way, I'm 33 years sober, clean and sober. And yeah, and I met some sober folks like me who wanted to become more active in the LGBT rights movement. And my co-chair, Maritza Martinez, she was also in AA, and that's how we met. And I owed her a bucket of chicken for some event we were supposed to do, which I never showed up to because I was out doing my thing, But anyway, and finally we wrapped a coffee can and we went to the gay bars on Roosevelt Avenue, and we said, we didn't go till about 11 o'clock at night when people had enough drinks in them that they would actually think that, okay, we'll give you $1 or $2. And we went to the first bar, was called Bachelors. It was on 81st Street in Roosevelt with the coffee can, and people gave us 50 cents, $1, and we left with $54, and that's how we started the Queen's Pride Parade. And then we went to other bars after that. So it was a real grassroots movement to do that, but a lot of people were afraid. I mean, a lot of the folks in our community in Jackson Heights, don't forget, first they're dealing with issues of race and ethnicity and national origin. Many are transgendered, many are undocumented, and they couldn't risk adding to that being out, as an LGBT person. So we weren't quite sure how it was going to go, but the fact that Julio was also Latino created this identification with Latino members of the community where people would come up to me, and I speak a little bit of Spanish, and they would say, oh, is this for Julio? And I said, yes, this is in memory of Julio Rivera. Oh, okay. And even though I think sometimes due to Catholicism or religion or whatever it may be, many folks in the Latino community would not, especially in those days, would not be as accepting of LGBT children of their own. There was this identification that they killed Julio because he was gay, but they could have also killed him because he was Latino or just because he was different. And so, I would have been happy that first parade if we had 500 people marching down the street in Jackson Heights, but thousands showed up. And it was many, and it was all Latino, basically. And that first year, as the Colombian Gay and Lesbian Association passed by, the Colombian people were out with the flags. As the Ecuadorian, Argentinian, whatever, and everybody identified with it. And they identified with the idea of the discrimination. We could all be affected by that.
That's amazing. Yes. So I wrote this play based on the grant from LaGuardia Archives and from support from your office. And it was written in memory of my uncle, Uncle Tito Hector Rivera, who lived in Elmhurst and died of AIDS in 1991, and probably knew Julio and probably was at the bars. So it was a profound experience for me to write this, and sort of reclaiming my history and my family ancestry. And it's, thank you for helping fund that.
You mentioned in the play community.
Yeah.
And I think that so much of what happened in Jackson Heights, especially in those days, was about community. And once you have a community, it's much harder to attack people. And I really remember that line from the play tonight.
Yeah, safety in numbers, right? They try to stack us all together, like Jay Heights says in the play, thinking that we're going to disband or fall or collapse. And yes, we will, but we'll also rebuild.
Right.
Does anyone have any questions for Danny?
No questions.
Yeah.
When the news broke, when you first came out publicly, did you feel supported by your fellow teachers and your actual administration, or was it mixed?
So the question is, when you came out publicly at the school board meeting, what was the reaction from fellow teachers and colleagues?
Most of the teachers in my school are supportive. But the thing that was really surprising to me, but then again not, was the fact that the parents of the kids were highly supportive of me. And so when I went, the news trucks were at the school for 4 days with satellites and everything, and they're asking the kids through the fence, well, like, what's it like to have a gay teacher? And the kids are going like, oh, gay teacher? I don't know. It wasn't all, it was all new to them. They couldn't quite get it all. But anyway, the parents on that first day came to the school, and they literally stood in the hallway, all Latino immigrants, by the way, mostly, and they said, nothing's going to happen to this teacher. We love him, and we want him here. And I'll never forget that, because if you're a teacher and you got the support of the parents, you're set. Parents love you, you're good. Yeah.
Absolutely.
The principal, he was a very conservative Italian guy. He was probably 30 years older than me at the time, close to retirement and stuff. He was okay, but he just didn't want news coverage. Probably no principals like news coverage, and at that time it was viewed as negative news coverage. My view was that all coverage at that time, especially with AIDS and everything else that was going on, was good coverage.
I agree. I even back when I was, back in the day when there was no media attention on us at all,
Right.
There was nothing. Even negative coverage was good coverage because at least we existed. Right. We were seen, even if it was negative, we were seen. And that's sort of, like when I write plays, I write a lot of flawed queer characters, but it's like we're multifaceted, right? So it's not all going to be the Harvey Milk plays. Like we need to be seen on all different levels.
We couldn't get news coverage in any of the Queens local papers here for the first parade. Nobody would cover us. We did a press conference with Richard Spuntoff, who was here in residency all week with you and in classrooms. And that was the first coverage that we got. It was in the Daily News, and it was about 2 days before the parade. But nobody else would really cover us, and very few, I think only one, really covered the first Pride Parade in the borough as well.
Wow. Other questions? Anybody? Putting you all on the spot?
Are you in education?
No, just my mom was a teacher, so I know about the bureaucracy of being in the public school system, so I just wanted to know if you felt supported.
It's an excellent question because, I'm still involved with curriculum stuff with the Department of Education. And teachers long for this type of information to be able to do it in the classroom. But many of them, because of what happened around Rainbow, the chancellor actually lost his job because of Rainbow. Many of them still today fear addressing these issues in the classroom, and they just won't do it. Even though we have a very supportive chancellor now, Chancellor Banks. We just did a summit in Brooklyn, at a high school in Brooklyn. Over 1,500 kids came, which was incredible. But many teachers still
Yeah, and I think it happens everywhere, and especially in academia. I mean, I think that the teachers are looking for progressive ways. Many teachers, not speaking for all. I think we hit roadblocks when we come up to money and when we come up to hold your ears, administration, admin creating sort of red tape for us, which we know comes from the city, which we know comes from money constraints. So we know this is happening. So the fact that you decided to go into politics to sort of be on the front lines to change that, going from an educator really has made our lives a lot easier, which is why we can be supportive, which is why we have administration here in this room watching a play with a bunch of F words, but we're trying to be accurate in the depiction of what the times were.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Just a quick question. You mentioned the chancellor lost their job. Who was the chancellor?
Joe Fernandez. Yeah, he was a great guy, actually. Lost a great chance. And the irony of that was that the person that they hired afterwards was Raymond Cortinez, and he was gay. He just wasn't out of the closet,
My father-in-law was Anthony Alvarado.
Was who?
Tony Alvarado.
Oh my gosh, wow, love Tony Alvarado too. Yep, very progressive, really good. District 2.
And that's Lou Moreno, who directed the show.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yay.
Any final questions for us? Yes, Matthew.
Apologize if I haven't listened to the entire story. If I were to be reminded again, which school or what type of school was it that you worked at? Was it elementary, middle school, or?
It was elementary, PS 199Q in Sunnyside, in District 24. And District 24, they were the leaders against the rainbow curriculum. So, and then there was also, maybe you heard of Ruben Diaz from the Bronx. They followed suit up in the Bronx as well. So a number of school districts began to withdraw from having to teach the curriculum, and then Chancellor Fernandez took action against them, and then he was overruled by the board. It was this whole political controversy, and it took about a year, and then the curriculum was lost, and we still to this day do not have a comprehensive LGBTQIA curriculum in the public school system. I did, when I was education chair and finance chair, infuse some programs into the public school system, but it's not system-wide.
Any last questions? Yes.
And what do those school programs entail, if you'd like to share some of them?
What the school programs entail? So one of the things that I funded is something called Lambda Literary. That's an organization that promotes LGBTQ literature and writers and poets, etc. And they annually have a very nice award ceremony. But the school program that they offer is that they provide books for kids in the classroom, and teachers read the books with the kids, and then they study it, and then later on they invite the author to come to the classroom and to discuss the book itself, so the kids actually get a chance to do an author interview, which is really very nice. So we funded that at a high level. I think it was about $500,000 or so. But in the overall budget, the city budget for education is about $35 billion. So that's not that much money. Another program that we put into the school system is called History Unerased. And that really is to teach about all of the LGBTQ heroes with a specific focus on heroes of color, people like Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson are included in this. I'm forgetting, Bayard Rustin are included in the curriculum. So that folks that, we know something about, but we don't necessarily know that they were gay, because a lot of it's been whitewashed, literally whitewashed out of the curriculum. And so that program's been effective. The other thing that I did was I put in close to $1 million, I guess, for PFLAG, Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, because a lot of youth don't think that they can come out to their parents, and I don't advise that they always do, unless they have a safe place to be able to do it, or they feel their parents are going to accept them, because so many are thrown out onto the streets. But at least they can hear that some parents are accepting of their LGBTQIA children. And so they bring that message to ninth graders in the public school system. So there are other ones as well, but those are the really biggest ones that we've done.
It's amazing. You see Lambda Literary, huh? I was a fellow.
Oh, were you?
There,
Oh,
yes.
yeah, okay.
So was Jesus Valles in the audience,
okay.
amazing playwright and poet. We were both fellows at for different years. So thank you. This is why we're here. We're here because of you. Awesome. Yes.
I wonder if you could share with us, you've sustained this momentum and fight and created all of these paths. How did you keep your courage? How did you keep your heart so open in the face of the hate and the cynicism?
I never really looked at what I did as being courageous, to be honest with you. I looked at it as a means of survival, and that I didn't want to live in the closet. My mother loved me. I didn't need anybody else to love me. And if I lost the job, I lost the job. That's really the way that I felt. But I couldn't be in that situation, especially after that girl said what she said to me, and not be my authentic self, or not be able to do what I felt I needed to do for the students in my class, And so the way that it's actually, I haven't sustained it. The movement has sustained me. They have given me the energy to continue to go on. I'm doing a little bit less now than I did, for the last 30 or so years, but my life has been enriched by all of that. And so it's really given me that energy, and I've gotten more out of it than I've given to it. Thank you.
Work. Work. On that note, I want to thank you so much for sharing your resources, your person, and whether you think it was courageous or not, your courage. And inspiring a whole brand new series of educators, including myself, to continue. I always knew I was an artist, but I always knew I was an educator first. And you really have been one of the biggest inspirations for me as an educator for a long time.
Well, thank
so
you.
it's
We have
so
to take
nice.
this show on the road.
We're going to do it.
More and more, and let other
Let's do
people
it.
see it as well. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for attending.